Thank you again for inviting me into your house again. I love being here, and every time I'm around you, I can't help, and I say this all the time, that I love you.
Thank you.
But
I
I
love you too.
do, because you're so genuine and real, and your photography is beautiful art, and you tell such beautiful stories. And you are self taught,
That's correct.
which, what's with that?
Well, I don't know. I've never thought that I would be a photographer, first of all. And
Right.
that's something that this, I guess, was given.
Mhm.
Not religious,
Okay.
we might talk about that, but more spiritual. But definitely, I feel that something was saying to me that, hey, you got to do this. This is for you. We found something for you that will keep you at ease. So that's how photography came about. I've always liked it, and I was always interested even as a kid. But then again, it was something that I felt like it was more for really artistic, weird people, that they have this vision that they want to capture. So I tried that vision,
Right.
when I was back in high school, at the beginning of my high school. And I actually skipped some classes. My parents don't even know this probably, but they know now.
They will now.
Right? They
Yeah.
will know now. And so I'm originally from Hungary, and we have this really beautiful fall. And when I say beautiful, it's not necessarily the yellow leaves I'm talking about.
Right.
It's for me, beautiful is a foggy, misty morning. So we have these really big roads, and I remember this, and I set out to at the end of one of the roads, and I was watching the falling leaves, and it was a little bit foggy, and I had a film camera, and I had this idea, but I wanted to capture it in black and white. And of course, when I developed the film, it didn't even look close to what I imagined.
Right.
So that's when I thought that this would be not for me. This is not something that I'm good at or I would enjoy. And honestly, at that point, I just put down the camera. I don't think I've ever touched it for years after.
And so, in the meantime, what were you doing? Budapest, Hungary. You were born and raised there.
Yeah.
What was life like for you?
It was good. I mean, back, I was born in 1969, so this was really at that I wouldn't say like the height, but still at the communist era.
Yeah.
Um, and I know we talked a little bit about it, but you're asking how it was growing up as a child. I think as a child, when you grow up, you don't necessarily see things
Yeah.
because everything is beautiful. You're playing as long as you have the freedom, or at least some freedom that you can spend with your friends or go out, then you're okay. Now, growing up and thinking back, it's very different now. But I've always said to myself, like anything that you have learned or anything that have happened to you just made you who you are. So these are, I would say, fond memories of like, being a child in Hungary.
Right.
Again, this was still at being a communist country. You were still severely um, held back as to where you could travel, even in Eastern Europe. If you had a passport, let's say you could travel to some of the Eastern Bloc countries, and then when it started to open up, then you could go elsewhere. But as a child, I guess, that wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do. So I enjoyed myself as a kid,
Right.
as anybody else
Yeah.
does. So I think I honestly think that I had um, a good childhood,
A good
for
childhood.
sure.
And it sounds like you had a pretty full family unit. Parents, both your parents,
Yeah,
right?
both my parents, yeah, they're still living, thank God. So
Nice.
I'm very happy for that.
Yeah.
My grandparents, and I think I do see um, uh, this problem right now, people not having their grandparents in their lives
Yeah.
because grandparents are so important. They really teach you. I was just talking to my dad the other day, and I even said to him, it's interesting how when I was a kid or when we were small, as children, the information that you would get was from your parents,
Mhm.
from schooling, and definitely from your grandparents. Because if you didn't know something, then you would go and ask your grandfather or your grandmother, whether it was about cooking, about nature and all those things. My grandfather was a gardener, so he knew everything about plants and fruits and all those things.
Wow.
So family was really, really close. And then of course other information would be at the library. If you look at kids now, they have such an advantage of having one phone with
Yes.
YouTube and all the information on there, and yet they're still not knowing how to use the information properly. But for us, back then, the grandparents was important. So I think even now, it would be good to have the grandparents around. They teach you so much.
Right. And so you had mentioned that the first time you left Hungary, you went to Kuwait.
Yeah,
What?
so I was 9. My dad used to work for a transportation company,
Okay.
and then he got sent over to Kuwait as the representative for the company for 5 years, and he took us with him, the whole family. I do have a brother,
Right.
so my brother was really small. I think he was 2 years older then, and we have 7 years between us.
Okay.
And my mom. My mom didn't work; she was just at home. Now we actually went to school. Most of the Hungarian kids would actually be homeschooled.
Really?
For us, we did go to school, and it's interesting because you get into a Middle Eastern country where you don't know the language at all. So coming from Hungary, it was only Hungarian that I knew. I didn't speak any other language. And then you get into a Middle Eastern country. You go to the American school first for 3 months to pick up some language.
Okay.
And then my parents decided that, they were going to put me and my brother, when he was at that age, to an Indian school. It was called the New East Indian School.
What?
And it was definitely a shocker first. But, I couldn't have asked for better friends,
Really?
that time. And I was honestly the only white kid in the whole school. So we had 2,000 students, and I was the only white kid.
So
there.
what would have made your parents decide to move you to this Indian school?
Well, my dad says, and I can agree with him now. Not back then. I did not agree with him back then. The American schools were, number one, were super expensive.
Okay.
Number two, his reasoning was that the teachers that actually teach at the school are basically homestay moms that had nothing to do, so they got hired to teach at the school.
Okay.
Now, there's nothing wrong
No.
coming from a homestay mom,
Yeah.
but the teachers that were actually in an Indian school were actually teachers.
So was that the first time you were around people that didn't look like yourself? How diverse is Hungary? Growing up, was it normal that you would see?
Well, back then it was not.
Okay.
So before 1983 is what I'm talking about. That's when we left.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, 1978.
Yes.
And I'm born in 1969. 1978 is when we actually left and
Okay.
came back in 1983. So back then, diversity was really not there in
Not
Hungary
there.
because you were closed as a communist country in Eastern Europe. So you would have Eastern European countries
Yes.
visit you if they could, but there isn't as much of a tourism like it is now.
Right.
So yes, first of all, it was a culture shocker. You go from a 4-season country to a
Wow.
1-season country, because in the Middle East, in Kuwait, it's pretty much summer all year long.
Right.
So, and then there's no green, there's no trees, there's no grass. You're in the desert, right? Lots of oil, lots of money. Everything was different. The cars were different. The people were different.
Oh.
The weather was different. So yeah, that was a massive shock, and I remember that still vividly. That you would just look outside and you open the door and it's so hot, and the food is different. You have this Western food that you didn't have back. And we're talking about back when I was a kid, my dad used to travel, let's say, to Austria, and I remember the first time he bought over some kiwis. We had no idea what a kiwi was. And it was such a weird fruit, right? It's green inside, it's kind of sour and
Fuzzy on the outside.
Yeah, it was beautiful. But it was that's how it was back then. Even you wouldn't be able to get, let's say, bananas always. Right. So it's very, very different. And then being in Kuwait, so the reasoning behind it is the actual teachers will give you the knowledge that you need. I went to school. It was not easy. I struggled with it quite a bit. I felt really that little, what do you call that, little black swan or duckling It's the little story about the is it the duckling that's different color than all the
Oh,
rest of the duckling,
the ugly
right?
duckling?
Yeah, exactly.
You
Um,
felt like the minority?
definitely minority. I was the only white kid, right?
Welcome.
So I think but these things are so beautiful because you get to learn and how to adapt to situations like that. And I think number one, it has made me who I am today.
Yes.
Experiencing different cultures and appreciating it. So I made a lot of friends. I think my studies weren't bad, but I had to learn English, and the way I learned English is they put me into the school. They didn't explain to me like, well, this is past tense. This is how it goes grammar wise. You just like basically the child. You just it keeps on building,
Yeah.
and suddenly after half a year you start speaking. That's how it is. And even for me today, I can speak English pretty well.
Yes.
But if they ask me, let's say my girlfriend's gonna ask me like, well, why is that? Like, why do you put it there? And why is it not in past presence to what? I'm like, I have no idea. I just
Half
know
the time it doesn't even make sense.
I don't know. I just use it. And I know that it's. I don't. I
That's
know
how
that
you
it's
talk.
proper that way.
Yeah.
So in the Indian school, and because I wasn't in Indian school, I actually had learned Hindi because that was their main language. And on top of that, because you're in a Middle Eastern country, you also have to learn Arabic. So now imagine me trying to cope with English,
Oh my gosh.
Arabic, and Hindi. And of course, they're all very different, even in just writing.
Yeah.
So the principal was kind of after half a year, 2 years, said like, okay, I think you're going to be really messed up learning these three languages in such a short time.
Yeah.
So let's not do the Hindi part, but you have to learn Arabic and English as we speak. So I learned Arabic and I was pretty good. I could write, but of course, as a child, you don't practice, you forget.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly what happened. And then on top of that, when we ended up coming back in 1983 to Hungary, that was really at the very edge or the border of being still a communist country, and the Russians were just about to leave. But we had to learn Russian too. That was something, as a Eastern European country or being in the Eastern European bloc, you have to learn Russian. So I came back and I was supposed to start in grade 8, but because my Hungarian was messed up too, they put me to grade 7. But because they put me to grade 7, I had to learn 3 years of Russian too. So basically, in the span of 5 years, I had to learn English, Arabic, a bit of Hindi, 3 years of Russian, and catch up on my Hungarian. And that was a little bit too much.
How do you talk so well? Like, how did that all work out for you? Because that's a lot.
It was a lot.
Especially for a child.
But I've, I struggled with many things, and yeah, I got my grades to a certain point where I could pass. And I still understand a little bit here and there. I understand Arabic. If somebody speaks to me, I might not fully understand it, but I can pick up a couple of words. Hindi, obviously not. I have lots of Indian friends, and I think that helped me. I do a lot of Indian weddings too, right?
Yeah.
And then Russian, just picking up some of the words. But I think it was so important. Right now, I think back, is it made me who I am.
That's right.
To experience these cultures. So every time I talk to someone, I tell them like, look, you have to. The best thing that you can do for yourself and for your kids is to travel.
I agree.
I wish I could be the education minister here in Canada. I would take the kids, well, obviously not now, but back then when this passes, and I would take them to Africa to understand, how people live, to appreciate wanting water more, right? It would be so cool.
I agree. There's a lot of things that we take for granted just because we don't know any different though. So I think it was a gift that your dad was able to, his job took you guys, and even it exposed him to different places, like bringing back the kiwi fruit.
Yeah.
But what an experience that you got to go live in.
I absolutely enjoy it. And I look back at my childhood, and I think, as I said, like it made me who I am, made me stronger and understanding and patient with people, a little bit more, and understanding cultures. And it helped me, as a photographer later down the road. I realized that, maybe my pictures are so unique and deep because of all those experiences that I've had, and I believe in that.
And because you're destined to be a photographer. If you ask me, I'm sorry. I think that is your gift, that's your calling.
I guess, and it's interesting, because I always, how when you ask people about what do you want to be when you grow up, you ask your kids and they don't know. Well, I didn't know until I was 33. And this just happened that photography came I just fell in
Just
my
fell in your
laps.
lap.
It fell because I moved to Canada back in 1997 for the first time, and then 1999. And, I felt like, I had to change my life all over. And it was hard coming from um, a home where you had everything. You had your family, your friends, a car, your work. I had, my little apartment. And then you go into a brand new country and you have to start your life all over again. So I think what happened was I started picking up the camera. And one thing that I've noticed that, and this was back in the film days, I grab my camera and walk the streets like 8th Avenue. That was the old Penny Lane district. And there's a lot of homeless people there. And I would love to chat and sit down with homeless people. And once I made that connection with them, I asked them if I could take some pictures. And that was the start, really.
That was
And
it.
it helped me, calm myself down or ease my brain because I felt a lot of anxiety coming to a new country. So sitting down with someone and talking to them and getting to know their stories and then taking some pictures, that helped me lots. And that's how I started actually as a portrait photographer too. So even today, I consider myself a portrait photographer.
Yeah, like that's your thing, hey? You prefer portraits. Would
Very
you say
much.
that? Yeah.
Definitely.
Because you know what? It's so funny. When we had our session, that was the first time that I've ever, like, you really do have a way with people. I'm sure you know this. But you allow people to feel safe to be vulnerable or to allow, like you allowed me to show you who I was. And so when you say that portraits are your favorite, it's that connection, no?
It's a lot of psychology. I would say, like, the technical part of being and this is where, because I teach photography, I tell my students many times that, it's not the technical knowledge that will get you to that point. You have to have that base, to know what lens or what camera settings you need to do in certain situations. But once you get that out of the equation, then it becomes really that attention that you and your subject.
Right.
And I find that people are, number one, they're impatient, so they want to see that you're paying attention to them and not your equipment. Right. So once you get that, then you can start talking and knowing and understanding the people. I read people very well. I know that. And again, it's, I guess, all those things in my life, whether it's the travels or where I grew up as a child, the cultures that I've seen and experienced, the places that I worked at, have all made me and contributed to who I am. So sometimes it gets a little bit too much for me as well because I read people or I try to read people too much. But at the same time, I do enjoy it. And I think I can't really think back of any situation where somebody would have told me that, hey, Andras, that was not cool. I didn't like that. I didn't feel, comfortable. Because I always read body language so much that I can tell you what you're comfortable with and when to stop or when to not even start doing photography. And there's a favorite saying, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say this the proper way, but you'll get the idea.
Okay.
And this is so relevant to professional musicians as well as, let's say, photographers. And it says something like this: when you start out, you play every tune, you take every picture. When you get to the pro level, then you are specific on playing certain tunes, and you are looking at taking certain pictures. Now, when you get to that super top level, where it's like there's nothing else is there, then you know when not to play, and you know when not to take a picture.
So would you say you're there? You've kind of.
I'd say I know when not to take a picture now.
Okay.
So, but then again, I look at my photography very differently, right? I honestly, because I've never learned photography, I never went to school. It was just something that I've made into my own. It feels very easy for me. Always have felt very easy for me. I see it, I understand it. So I can't really talk about my photography. Actually, I hate talking about my photography. I really do.
Do you?
I always say, like, let my pictures speak. If you look at my pictures, that should say the story, what I'm trying to relay back to people. But but yeah, I don't like. So when people ask me like, so are you a master photographer? Are you top of the line? I don't know. It's not for me to say.
You're just so humble.
I don't know.
think
I have to be. You can't.
there's
You know
humility.
what? You have to be like, if you reach a certain level and you want to be approachable always, 100% of the time, that there is no other way.
Right.
You can't have it the other way. You have to be humble.
Yeah.
So people can learn from you. They can experience you. They can appreciate who you are, not just an artist, but as a human being.
Right. Yeah, because you're not even comfortable with the label
No,
being an artist, are you?
no.
You're really, and I don't know why.
People ask me all the time, when I do an interview, or when they do a series of me in a magazine, and they say, well, can we put like photography master photographer? I'm like, no, just say photographer, or better yet, just say Andras Schram. That's all.
Yes, just the
Yeah,
person.
I have a hard time with that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I felt like it's never for me to indicate who I am. People can decide. They obviously, the people that I work with and they like my work, they can make a difference between, people and artists.
Right.
But I just, I don't think I'll ever be that guy that says like, hey, I am who I am.
Right. Well, because you're just who you are.
Yeah.
Okay, but you are a storyteller, and that
Definitely.
is evident in all of your work.
Yes.
Beautiful. And I was talking to you like a month ago or whichever. I was saying during COVID, it's been hard. I think it's been challenging for a lot of people, especially people who like the connection. You fill up on the human connection, and I've been lacking that. And so I said, there's been times when I've been scrolling through Instagram and I see a portrait or some of your photography, and I told you it just feels so good to be able to. This is how I know what you do is magical. If I could look at a photograph of someone I've never met, I don't know their story, but I feel them and I could relate to it. It is such a beautiful thing. It's so beautiful, and I think it's so important now to connect with that humanity, with one another.
Well, especially now, I think it's such a trying time for everyone, right? Even when you came in, we hug, shake hands and do a kiss here and there, and now people like even that with people that very well, you're like, are you hugging? Can I shake your hand? So it's incredible that within that 1 year, not even that 1 year now, we're not at 1 year yet. Things have changed so much.
Yeah.
So we miss that connection. The body touch,
Yeah.
a hug's so important, right?
Yes.
It's not like, hey, you're speaking behind the mask. I can't even see your facial expressions right now. Most of us, I think, our biggest issue, especially with me too, because I read lips always too. I look at your eyes, I look at your lips, I look at your eyes, look at your lips. And now you're taking that part out. You don't know, like, okay, I can smile from my eyes too, but you smile from our, just like you right now, right? I can tell that you're smiling from your eyes, but I need to see your lips or your mouth smiling. And so when that's being taken away, and it's taken away on a daily basis, people get confused.
I agree.
People get confused and they become impatient. They'll go like, okay, well, maybe she was or he was thinking about this when I was buying this, and so there's no connection, and suddenly everybody becomes very, very short-tempered and irritated. You see this every day. So I'm really looking forward to when we can take the mask off. I understand it very well, and I'm very comfortable in wearing it. And I tell people that you should too. But it's not meant for us, and especially for me. I was thinking too, like, maybe I can do like a series of like, people behind masks. That could be like a series, but no, I just can't do it. No. I can't get myself to it. I need to have your whole face in front of me, because even the slightest, move of your lips can indicate,
something.
A change in your thinking, and I need to capture that.
So how has this all been for your daughters? Because you have 2 daughters. How has this been for them?
It was okay. Like, I just came back in August. I was away in Europe for 8 months, and they actually, after the divorce, they moved to Normandy in France.
Okay.
my ex-wife decided that she wanted, I think, probably a change of scenery.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame her. And they went to Normandy, got a job offer there, and then she took the kids. And I thought it was like the best thing, going back on my past, traveling and staying in Kuwait. It will be good for them to learn another language.
Right.
French is hard, and French people are hard. So they did not cope with that very well.
No.
Even my older daughter was trying to find a job, and she went to university just to learn French. And then my little one who went to school, and first, it felt to me like, she really enjoyed it. She was this popular kid. Everybody wanted to be her friend. But I think then she drew back and she didn't understand the language, and that frustrated her. So at the end, I felt like she was more frustrated than enjoying being there. So when I moved, I didn't move. When I came back in August, they actually came 2 weeks later too.
Did they? Nice.
So they're back in Calgary now.
Okay.
And then the little girl, my little daughter, or the
she's not little, she's 15.
Yes, the younger one, she'll always be little, right?
Yeah.
The younger one started high school, and she was adamant that she wants to start high school here.
Okay.
And I think she's really enjoying it. She really is. Like,
because this feels like home to her.
Yes, they were born here, right? So I can't complain about that. But and then my older daughter started upgrading her points at the university. So I think she's very busy right now doing that. And then the little one, my little one, as I said, she loves her high school. So it's kind of nice to have. And it's nice to see that they're here too. And now I can really go over and meet them, versus, when I was always thinking that, okay, I'm going between Hungary and Calgary, and then now they're in Normandy. So then that becomes a triangle. Now I go from Hungary to Normandy and then back to Calgary. But Normandy was far. It's about 3.5 hours of drive from Paris. So it was still far. So it's better to have them here now and enjoy their company or bring them over than to have them, to be honest, in France. And if it makes them happy being here, I think that's all that matters. I'm still thinking that, that they've learned the French language. That was very beneficial.
Right. Because how long were they over?
Well, they were there for 2 years.
Okay.
2 years.
That's a good amount of experience that you gain in 2 years.
Yeah.
So you were saying you do go back home to Hungary often, don't you?
Yeah. Right now, in the last 4 or 5 years, especially in the last 2 years, I've pretty much spent my winters there. I would leave at the end of October, beginning of November, and come back in April. And of course, with me too, business-wise, I've lost a lot of my work. Yeah. Or if not lost, then it got postponed to next year. So there isn't anything for me here between November and April. I'm going to go back and then just do my thing. We opened a little studio back in Hungary, in Budapest. So I can finally do my little portrait sessions and sit down with people that I enjoy so much. So I miss that tremendously. I do work from here as well, but this is my home, so it's a little bit different. I'm very selective of who I let in, and but sometimes I need to do it. I need to sit down and do portraits, and I don't always get it outside. So I want to do it like in a little bit of a closed-in environment. But I think it's.
I think it's great.
Out, yeah.
I know I had asked you to describe yourself in 5 words. And in your words, you are funny, emotional, kind, compassionate, and restless.
Yes.
So when you talk about restlessness, how are you restless?
Well, my mind is very active.
Okay. You got a busy mind.
Yeah, that's for me. Even when people say to me like, well, it looks like you're stressed out, like, you can't sleep, or I complain about not being able to sleep or relax. And I say, well, why don't you meditate? And
do you meditate?
I tried, and it's still, I have not learned how to do it properly. I guess that's the way. I'm sure this can be learned. Maybe I'm impatient with it, but it's like me going into meditation is like, for the first 10 seconds, and after 10 seconds, I go like I'm counting.
You're done.
I'm counting seconds, and that's obviously not the good thing. So, I actually bought a little device just to figure out if I can make this work. It's called a Muse, and what it does, it when you attach it to your head, it reads your brain waves, and what it does, it attaches to your phone, and it plays a sound. Let's say you're out in the wilderness and there's rain dripping. Now you can do 5, 10, 20, or 30-minute sessions, and your phone will tell you when your brain is wandering. So you have periods of calm, you have periods of too much action going on, or you have periods of like when you can actually hear the birds.
Mhm.
So they categorize it in three. And if you're doing this right, and the phone doesn't, or the headband doesn't sense that your brain is wandering off, and will start playing little bird sounds, like little bird chirps, right? So you're actually going about for as many birds as you can. And if you're wandering off, then the sound actually becomes more violent and more rumbling, like as your mind.
So it forces you.
Yeah, and when you calm, then it actually calms down. So you can you can actually listen to your brain waves, which I think is amazing. So I think that this have worked for me a little bit, but I just have to make it consistent. But I travel with, I actually have trouble with, as I said, this and when you ask me about restlessness, that's exactly what I'm feeling. And not just that, it's for me, I need to create. And this is, well, I guess partially, the people that follow me or they, or I inspire them, they want to see new work from me always come out. They want to get inspired. So and I feel that too. There's a pressure.
Yeah.
And there's a pressure of doing that. Like, okay, what other portrait is Andras going to bring out this week? And how many times this week? Right? That's what it is. So I'm very active on social media.
You are. And I was going to ask you about that because we've talked about social media and the balance. Because as much as it's a wonderful thing, you could reach people anywhere and everywhere, and as many people as you could reach, that's a wonderful thing. But the falseness of social media as well, and that whole virtual world, how do you balance that?
Well, I think for me, I would say it's fairly simple because what you see is what you get from me, right? So there isn't anything. I'm not trying to become an influencer. My pictures are there to speak. And I might write a few words about a certain picture that I post, whether it was yours or somebody else's. But I'll just leave it for the audience to like or not like. Facebook, I would say, used to be a good platform for sharing with people, but it has changed so much that I get irritated with it very much.
Do you?
Yes. So now I might share more of my series, and it's really there to keep in touch with family, which is a great platform for that. And then also sharing it with your couples, and they will share it, and in return, that's marketing for you right there.
Right.
Instagram, I started loving, because you just post.
Simple.
And that's it.
Yeah.
There's no drama. It's just there. So, and it's interesting how I started my Instagram. I started to post everything, and now for the last 2 years, it's just my black and whites and my portraits. And I went on that. One of my favorite photographers is Peter Lindbergh, and he passed away recently. And he was just black and white. That's all he did. Amazing work. So, I feel like that's where I'm going. I have a couple of other sites, but purely the Andras Schram on Instagram is now black and white, and but that's portraits or couples or something interesting, but it's always black and white.
It's beautiful too.
Thank you.
Very beautiful.